Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're going to be discussing The Race Around the World. This is a collection of writings by Elizabeth Bisland and Nellie Bly. So we're going to be discussing The Race Around the World, but I've actually got two other books here that I just wanted to mention because they deal with the same topic. Yes, Artemis loves them. So if any of you have heard the story of the race around the world between Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland, you probably came to it through this book called 80 Days by Matthew Goodman, who basically took their writings and, did his own spin on them. And this came out a few years ago, so it was really popular when it came out. And if you have heard about this race, it was probably through his work. And then there's also Elizabeth Bisland's own book about the subject that came out at the same time, and this is actually my favorite of these three books. But I wanted to focus on the one that also has some of Nellie Bly's writings, because that way you see both perspectives.
And it's such a contrast.
It's such a contrast. Well, as the fans who've read the Tales of Chetzemoka have worked out by now, because I reference it a few times, I much prefer Elizabeth Bisland's writing. That's why I have Sophie sort of quietly commenting in her own internal monologue that Elizabeth Bisland is a much better writer than Nellie Bly, because she was.
Yes.
Elizabeth Bisland was a literary critic for Cosmopolitan magazine.
First, though, we should set the scene.
Okay, set the scene.
Yes. So this race around the world was something that was sort of a stunt journalism event.
Right.
And it was based on, of course, Jules Verne's book, Around the World in 80 Days.
Right.
And so the challenge to these two female journalists was to try to beat that record in actuality.
And it was Nellie Bly's idea. Nellie Bly did this sort of thing all the time. She was a gonzo journalist.
One of the first.
Yeah, one of the first. Give her credit for that. She did these wild and weird, crazy stunts so that she could write about them. The most famous probably is she got herself admitted to an insane asylum, and actually she probably should have been kept there. Because she did have some unhinged elements, but basically she was the sort of person who, if she were alive today, she would go out and do really stupid stunts so that she could, for one afternoon, so that she could then do a YouTube video, bold caps, saying, I did such and such and I survived. You know the type.
Yes.
So she was that sort of journalist. She kind of helped invent that genre. I will give her credit for that. I don't particularly appreciate the genre, but I will give her credit for inventing it. And so she came up with this idea of a race around the world. Now,
Elizabeth Bisland was a much more traditional female journalist.
Right.
She was fairly serious. She wrote involved, in-depth articles based on lots of research. And she was the one that sort of a rival paper put up against Bly when this idea of the race came up.
Right. Bly was working for The World at the time. Bisland was working for Cosmopolitan. And Bisland was from a literary family. Her sisters were reporters as well.
We should also say Cosmopolitan was a dramatically more serious piece of journalism in those days.
Yes, and especially more serious than The World.
Yes.
And when Bisland's editor saw that The World was sending Bly literally around the world, around the globe, he thought that they'd made a miscalculation, because they were sending Bly west to east. And because of the way the winds were blowing across the Pacific at that time, the editor of Cosmopolitan, who had traveled a lot, thought that it would be faster to go east to west. And having made that calculation, he said, hey, my publication could send our own reporter the faster way around, and we could turn a race and we could make a race out of it and beat the world and scoop the world. Now he comes to Elizabeth, actually he makes Elizabeth Bisland come to him. He sort of summons her and says, okay, you're going to leave on a race around the world right away. It's like, okay. But he was her boss. So, I mean, how would you feel if your boss suddenly said, okay, you're leaving on a race around the world right now?
Well, of course the prospect is exciting, but Elizabeth Byland, I think, is a lot like me in terms that she would probably have preferred to have much more planning involved and time to absorb this idea.
Right. I mean, my first thought would be, yay, but who's going to take care of my cats and my birds and everything?
Yes.
I mean, she did have a life going on, but no, she just had to drop everything and suddenly go around the world. At least Bly had more notice because she'd been asking to do this.
Though her personality, honestly, she probably wouldn't have cared.
Oh, she wouldn't have cared.
Right.
She wouldn't have cared. But, I mean, whose itinerary do you prefer? West to east or east to west? Because Bly wound up going, first she crosses the Atlantic and lands in Europe and meets Jules Verne and his wife. Byland goes by train across North America, gets on a boat, crosses the Pacific, lands in Japan. Which would you rather do?
I like the crossing America then to Japan route better.
And why?
I think that, well, first, crossing America by train before you get straight onto a ship is a good start. You start with the familiar, and then after your longest boat ride of the whole journey, then you end up in the place that's probably was at the time the most exotic. True.
And the other downside of Bly's itinerary is by starting on a ship very first thing that happens is she gets miserably seasick.
Right.
And actually the other passengers were laughing at this gonzo journalist who does stunts for a living, yet she is so sick, all she can do is stay in her cabin or sort of lean over the railing because,
Byland doesn't end up with that problem.
She gets a bit sick, but it's not the very first thing that happens.
Yeah. Right. But no, I prefer that itinerary, heading across America first, then across the Pacific to Japan, and then from there around the rest of the way. I think that's, I don't know, but that's one thing. We'll have to see what other people think.
Yeah.
Which direction you'd rather go.
Yeah. So feel free to leave that in the comments. Which would you prefer? And I thought that of these two, Byland was far, far more culturally sensitive than Bly. Bly was like the classic ugly American. She was terrible. When Elizabeth Byland is asked to take off her shoes, like before entering a temple, I mean, this is a sacred space. You are supposed to take off your shoes. She dutifully takes off her shoes, and then she laughs at how funny they look because she's got these big American feet, and so she's laughing at herself on her funny big shoes sitting outside the temple. Bly just categorically, says, no way, I'm never going to take off my shoes. I'm American. I'm not going to take off my shoes for you ugly foreigners. As she's traveling around the world, it's terrible. It's utterly terrible. And when they're looking at the Chinese they meet in various places, Nellie Bly basically sees them as these efficient laundry machines, whereas Elizabeth Byland is actually interested in their culture. She watches them dropping prayers off the ships for a safe passage. She gives statistics about them, which Bly never does.
Of course, because again, she's a real journalist and a serious journalist. Byland is. And so she really is approaching this in a curious and researched way.
Right.
And also her writing is just much better. This is why it's really fun to read this volume that contains a lot of both of their writings, because you get to see the contrast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very enlightening because it shows you that there was a wide range of sensitivity and opinion and openness to other ideas and cultures, in the late 19th century. And, it's a time that a lot of people will say was pretty narrow-minded about that, and I do not agree.
I don't agree either.
I think there was a very wide range of ideas and opinion, probably just about as wide as today.
Right. And Bly is very much writing to be sensational. Nellie Bly is writing what she thinks is going to get the most rise out of people.
Yes.
Elizabeth Byland is writing
to inform
people, to educate people, and it's a very different style. And Nellie Bly is always saying how democratic she is and how American she is, and gosh darn it, I'm American, I'm all for democracy. And yet she's doing all these things. Like, she's got this letter from her editor that she keeps, sticking in the captain's faces on the boats and everywhere she goes, that just basically says, be nice to this woman. She's traveling alone. She's doing this difficult thing. But she's using it to try to get all of these special perks. She's, telling the captain, hey, I need the best room. I need special treatment. See, I've got this letter that says I'm special and I need special treatment. And there's a bit where the captain takes her gives her a steward to show her to her room, and she says, oh no, I can't sleep there, that room's not good enough, I need a better room. And there's another bit where she's upset because the captain he's busy, he's the captain of a ship. He doesn't automatically drop everything to phone and say, oh, Nellie Bly, Nellie Bly. And she gets really pissy about that. Even though she's supposedly all for democracy, whereas Elizabeth Bisland is always very polite to everyone. She's, recognizing that she's a guest in these different countries.
She's calm even when things go wrong.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she doesn't blow up at anyone.
Right,
yes.
Right. So very different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And even in terms of things like shopping, Elizabeth Bisland, even though she's been told to haggle, that is part of the culture of these various countries, she just can't bring herself to do it. She looks at the price and says, that's such a reasonable price, and these are nice people, and I'm a guest in this country, I'm just going to pay the price. Whereas Bisland is always
Bly.
trying, Bly, Nellie Bly, is always...
Don't get them backwards.
I know, they're both, yeah. Nellie Bly is always trying to beat down the prices. She's always trying to, feel like she stuck it to someone, and it's just not attractive.
Yes, you clearly didn't like Nellie Bly.
I really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. I liked Elizabeth Bisland,
Mm-hmm.
and I've read other things by Elizabeth Bisland, and just like I said, I've read her full book on the race, and I think she was the better writer, and there are people who are not going to like me for saying this, but I think she was the better person, honestly. I think that if I was going to have one of them to dinner, it would be Elizabeth Bisland and not Nellie Bly.
I agree.
Yeah.
But who won the race?
Nellie Bly won the race.
Right.
Nellie Bly won the race. And because of that, and it was her idea, to be fair, it was her idea. And because she won the race, and because audiences love a winner, when modern commentators like Matthew Goodman write about this race, they carefully edit the narrative to make the audience more sympathetic to Nellie Bly, because they want their audience to root for the one who's going to win, and they want the audience to be satisfied at the end and feel that, yeah, the right person won. But having read both of their versions of it, I can't say that it was necessarily the right person that won. I do think, though, that based on what happened to them later in their lives, Nellie Bly kept doing the gonzo journalism, and then when she couldn't do that anymore, she wound up marrying a guy 40 years older than her, who had $5 million. And when he died, she tried to take over his company, but she managed it so badly she got taken to court for just this terrible mismanagement of this big company, and she wound up fleeing to Austria in 1914.
It was an attempt at a retirement plan.
It was an attempt at a retirement plan, marrying a 70-year-old guy when you're only 30 who has $5 million. Well, yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Whereas Elizabeth Bisland, she just, went back to writing. She wrote some novels. She married a guy similar age to her. They just had this nice, quiet life. I think that if Elizabeth Bisland had won that race, it would have destroyed Nellie Bly. Whereas Nellie Bly winning the race, Elizabeth Bisland just sort of shrugged and said, okay, that's life, it happens. And so I think that in terms of the impact on their lives, for Nellie Bly's sake, it was fortunate that she won. Because I think it would have been it would have been harder on her to lose than it was on Elizabeth Bisland.
For Elizabeth Bisland, it really was another assignment.
It was another assignment, Yeah,
Sure, it was a significant one, a large one, and a challenging one,
right,
but it was just another assignment.
right.
It wasn't a make or break
right.
sort of referendum on her style of journalism or anything else.
Right, and for Bly it was.
Right.
For Bly it was. So, The Race Around the World by Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland. We highly recommend it. And if you're going to read this, take a break, because a lot of this is excerpted from Elizabeth Bisland's A Flying Trip Around the World. So take a break between the two, or it's going to seem repetitive. But I do also recommend you read Elizabeth Bisland's A Flying Trip Around the World, because she's a wonderful writer. And she has this wonderful, beautiful way of expressing all of these lands she visited in 1880, 89. They left at the very end of 1888. They came back at the very beginning of 1889. And it's just a beautiful window into the world at that time.
And it was amazing that the world still had amazingly radical differences between places, but this new technological ability to move between them more quickly and easily than ever before.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you are wanting a vacation of your own, but you can't afford it, or you don't have time, or for whatever reason, these books are a great way to take a vacation, not through time, not only through space, but through time as well. And on that note, we hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!